We're live. We're live. Hi there. Welcome to Disney Deep Dive, where each week we dive into the history, story, and details of the Disney parks. I'm Leah.
And I'm your master of ceremonies, your confusingly Hispanic parrot, Stefan. And today we're taking a deep dive into the Enchanted Tiki Room.
After many clues for the past 2 weeks.
Yes.
Many clues. In case you didn't know. Heavy hinting.
This is 2 weeks worth of research, and even with that, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of this attraction. So that's just a preview into what we're about to get into. But first, what's that called?
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping
Is that next week, well, actually this coming weekend, we are going to be traveling, and we don't really do that often, and it's not to Disney World, unfortunately, or any of the Disney parks, but we will be traveling to my side of the family, a lake cottage, and so we do not know yet, and we will keep you posted. You can check out the live place, which thank you so much to Dean, who streams our live every week, and they have awesome family-friendly content on there, so definitely check them out. There's some amazing streamers on there, but keep an eye there, and also keep an eye on all of our social media. We will be updating if we aren't going live, because it's going to depend on our internet connection, for sure.
Yeah, in the past, internet, Wi-Fi, etc. has not been reliable in this area.
Yeah.
So we're not sure. It's gotten better. We're not sure if it's still great. So there's a possibility that we will not be able to. But we'll know way ahead of time if we're able to or not.
Right. And because there is a possibility too that we could go somewhere there we could even hop on and do like a quick thing on our phone just to say hey to you guys, and we'll totally do that if we're able. But again, stay posted to social media and the live place. We will let you know. We will be sure to update you so you're not waiting around and then we're not there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Yes, which is what we were going to do last week. Stefan was sick.
I'm better now.
He got me sick, so I have a little bit of it. I'm always drinking my water, but I have a little bit of scratch in my throat. So it's that itchy, getting better, but sound worse phase.
Yes.
So I'm going to be sipping a lot of water tonight.
So, as usual, we will start off with our personal experiences with this attraction. Leah?
Pretty much zero. I feel like there is a possibility that I did experience the Enchanted Tiki Room at Walt Disney World, never in Disneyland. I've never been to Disneyland. We say that every week, but just so you guys know, never been to Disneyland, not yet. But I believe that I may have experienced it, but if I did, I was a child and have no memory of it. So lasting impression-wise, not so much. The reason that I think that I may have experienced it is it's totally, definitely 100% something that my father would be very into.
Yes. I also have never experienced it. Only also have been to Walt Disney World, and we definitely never went here. I don't think we ever even considered it.
Yeah.
So I knew it was a thing. Like, I've heard about it. I've seen videos of it. I've heard people talk about it, but I've never been there myself.
And I was excited. We talked about doing it because I knew, of course, that it had been around, and it has kind of a cult following. And I know that in the pin community, there's tons of pins that are really popular, and I love all that stuff. Actually, the coconuts that we had are not from the Tiki Room, but they are from our Walt Disney World trip. We did the dinner show. There we go. We did the dinner show at the Polynesian. We stayed at the Poly, and so much fun. We had a great time. And we got along with Stefan's parents and his brother and his brother's girlfriend. We all got some fun drinks in them. And yeah, they were a cool little memento. We don't have them displayed anywhere, but I love them. I'm a sucker for this kind of stuff. But, here. Hello. Okay.
All right, so hopping into it. Also, first of all, for the fourth time, getting into this, I thought, it's a little room. It's a little tiki room. It's no big deal. Yeah, I know it's got a lot of history and people are really into it, but yeah, sure, let's do this. It'll be easy. There is so much history here that I just was not even aware of of, and it was really daunting, and getting into it really stressed me out. So I'm glad to be getting this out of my brain.
Claps to Steph, because really he does. I mean, we both will we'll start researching kind of just like videos and things like that. But I mean, Stefan he dives. He Disney deep dives in.
I have 8 pages of notes.
Yes, and it was really cool. Well, we'll get into that, but it's really cool seeing the historical significance and what was going on as a country at the time. So that's my favorite part about it.
So,
all right, let's do it.
Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room is a pseudo-Polynesian themed musical animatronic show drawing from the popular American tiki culture. It opened on June 23rd of 1963 at the Disneyland Resort in Disneyland. So that's just a basic overview of it. Mm-hmm. Now, the initial concept of the idea really begins like back in 1945 at the end of World War II. This isn't where most people begin with the story, but it's where I'm beginning, where we are beginning. The idea of like American tiki culture had started in the 1930s, like this idea of this like Polynesian tiki like trend had begun, but it hadn't really solidified. Hadn't really like swept the nation or anything yet. But after World War II ended and soldiers came back, especially those from the South Pacific,
right,
like the movie,
which we'll get to in a second.
They brought souvenirs and stories and all of this stuff back with them, and like the movie, Hollywood had already been like propagating this idea, and after they came back, they just further like solidified it into this idea of like this tiki Polynesian culture.
Yeah.
Now it's funny because this is a thing that I think that kind of gets not swept under the rug, but it like brushed over in terms of like American trends and history. Like people don't really remember or even talk about the tiki culture, but it was a thing.
Well, it was very referenced. I mean, we talk about the South Pacific because that was when we were doing this. I was like, oh my gosh, because I grew up, my parents would have me watch musicals, and I loved that movie. And even as a child, before I really knew, and then of course, as I got older and learned about the war and how it was, American soldiers were being exposed to this culture for the first time. And so, seeing that movie, and then Stefan, he's not as much into musicals, but he's watched it with me, and that's a good one. Mm-hmm. And so that was one that I thought of. But then also even like the Brady Bunch, so obviously that's quite a few years later, kind of towards the end of that culture, they reference tiki and obviously like the whole surfing thing and stuff. So I mean, tiki culture really, for that decade or so, was a prominent thing.
And like it's always been like a thing like in my life that I've been aware of. Like my mom grew up in Hawaii, so she always talked about it, and I knew that it was a thing. But it's one of those things that people kind of forget about, that it was a trend, it was a fashion thing. Yep. So after Hawaii became a state in 1959, that just kind of, stoked the fire, and people were like all
that furniture, all those rugs, all the
all the totems, all the tikis and everything, they were all about it. So with this in mind, this culture of the time, and it's not like this was like all over the United States. It was to a degree, but mostly in the West Coast and specifically California. So there were a lot of tiki bars there, and this was like a big trendy Anaheim thing. Yeah. Yes. So with that in mind, it's really no surprise that Walt Disney decided at one point to add a tiki-themed attraction to Adventureland. It just, you look at Adventureland, you're like, okay, yeah, that fits. It's like, it's an adventurous theme. It's a unique sort of thing. So at the time, Adventureland was getting a facelift. They were updating a lot of the things around there. It really only had the Jungle Cruise at the time. Yeah. So it's not like they had a bunch of rides to update, but they were definitely updating everything, making it look a little more fresh, and kind of like unifying the concept of Adventureland. So originally, Walt had conceived of like a tiki tea room, like a place where you would go to get like sandwiches. I guess kind of a quick service. Is how we would refer to it now. You would go and get sandwiches and drinks and like just little bits of food and things, and you would hang out and you would just kind of like enjoy the scenery around you.
And this was before. I mean, what dining is at Disney today is completely different. This is before, and we've talked about this again. We've touched on this in different episodes in the past, but this was before there was like table service and quick service and all of that established. They were really just working through the pieces there.
Yeah, exactly. So Disney legend John Hench, he drew up the original concept of what the room would look like. And it didn't have a name at this point. It was just a Polynesian tea room, basically. So he drew up the idea. And in the drawing, you can find this online. It's just like, it's a large room, and there's like plants and things around, and tables obviously for you to sit at and eat. And then there are bird cages with birds in them.
Yeah. Think like a rainforest cafe experience.
Yeah, proto rainforest cafe.
Right.
Basically, exactly that.
Yeah. So rainforest cafe took that idea.
So he presents this idea to Walt, and he's like, this is what I was thinking. And Walt looks at it and he goes, well, John, we can't have birds in cages. They're gonna they're noisy and they're messy. They're gonna poop on the food. We can't have that.
That's so gross.
That's not a thing. So this is in like a conference room. Like there's a bunch of people there and they're talking about it. So John is like, oh boy, because if you know anything about Walt Disney, you don't want to disappoint Walt Disney. Like, if you find any
say yes and figure it out later is pretty much
the few examples of people I've found who have talked about disappointing Walt Disney. It sounds like the most, like it's like the lowest point of their life. Oh, so like
that hurts my heart.
You don't want to disappoint Walt Disney. So he immediately starts backtracking. So Walt says like, we can't have live birds. That's it won't work. Mm-hmm. So he says no. They're stuffed birds.
Yeah.
They're not real. Of course not. They're ridiculous. They're stuffed birds. We'll put stuffed birds up there. And then Walt says, well, John, Disney does not stuff birds.
Right.
Like we don't stuff birds. We don't taxidermy animals and put them up.
Come to Michigan.
Yeah. So then John says, no, not, of course not. No, they're not stuffed birds. They're mechanical birds. They move around. And at this point he's thinking like Jungle Cruise. Like they move their heads and things. Mm-hmm. So this perks up a few people in the meeting, and they say yeah, and like a couple of them can like chirp to each other. Like one can chirp, the other one can chirp. And then, we can get a few of them, like, and they can be like talking to each other.
And now this would be no big deal. But back then, it was like, wait a minute, can we actually, can we do this?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
So at the time, hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
I mean, it had in a sense, but to the degree that they come up with, not really. Mm-hmm. So that is, at least that's how the legend goes, that this is how the initial concept for the Enchanted Tiki Room came to be. Kind of just someone trying to cover their butt and save face.
Yeah, back
in a meeting room.
That's not what I meant.
So the space they were planning on using for this new attraction, it was going to share a building with what ended up becoming the Tahitian Terrace. So you had like the Tahitian Terrace and then another building next to it, or a space next to it, which is where they were going to put this room. Which was perfect because then they could share a kitchen, they could just share amenities and things. They would be open. The plan was they would be open at like different times. So the Tahitian Terrace is more of a later show.
Yeah, and kind of advertise for each other at the same time because you'd walk through
exactly. Yeah, so the Tiki Room was going to be like earlier, and it was going to be like this symbiotic kind of restaurant relationship.
Yeah.
And that is the plan. That's what was going to happen. Basically up until they started putting together the actual show. Because at this point, they're just kind of like developing it. And I want to mention this now. The Tiki Room itself, and this is what was so maddening about trying to put this together in like a story format. The Tiki Room itself came together, like it's not like this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened.
Not sequential.
And then this happened. It's like, here's the goal, and there's a bunch of people coming at it from every direction.
Yeah, those boards where you see a string and you're trying to figure out a mystery? It was like that. Yeah,
it all happened. It all came together all at once. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like someone had an idea and then they decided, okay, well, let's work on this and then this. It all came together at the same time. Like there's no timeline here. There's just things happening all at once. And then eventually they somehow got this attraction together.
Quite the cluster.
It was. So what ended up happening is as time went on, there was concern that they get like when they started coming up with the idea for the show itself and how it would work and everything, they were thinking, well, this is going to be mesmerizing. People are going to love this. Mm-hmm. They're not going to eat their food. Like the idea was, okay, well, people are going to start eating and then the show will start happening and they'll stop and watch and go, oh, look at that, oh, check this out. And then when the show is over, they're going to have to hurry up, finish their food, and then get out of there. Because if you've ever sat through the Enchanted Tiki Room, you know that at the very end, they kick you right out. Mm-hmm. Because they got to prep to get the next group in there.
It's an endearing joke. Like, it's like kind of like that thing where it's not rude, but it's like, oh, yeah, haha, hurry up, like, get out of here.
Yeah. That whole, like, oh, for my next trick, I'll make you disappear, get out. So it in that sense, like it just wasn't gonna, it wouldn't make sense to have people sitting there eating. It was going to cause problems. It was going to make all these issues come up. So they nixed the idea of the restaurant. They said, okay, no restaurant. Let's just make this a show. And there were a lot of factors involved in that decision. It wasn't just that people were going to stop eating. Obviously, once they started developing the birds themselves in the show, they realized that this is something that could attract people in and of itself. But that was one of the main reasons, is that in terms of like flow and getting people in and out, it just wasn't going to work. So they got rid of that idea and they moved forward with it being a feature attraction in and of itself.
Yep, which is still how it remains.
So we're going to start with building the birds, how they came up with the birds and putting them together.
Hang on, I'm going to pause you for a second. If you are watching live, you can leave us comments. We will chat with you. And if you are watching the replay, leave us comments. We'll respond. Let us know if you have been to the Tiki Room in any of the parks, and we would love to hear about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Walt was intrigued with the idea of bringing like two-dimensional characters into three-dimensional space for quite a while. It was a thing that he was building up to. He'd been trying to do, obviously, with the Jungle Cruise, with the animals. Now, if you know anything about the Jungle Cruise, they went with mechanical animals because someone told him that.
That's one that's on my list. That's on my short list. We will eventually do it, but that's on my short list.
We'll do it eventually. But someone told him like you can't have real animals; they're going to sleep most of the day and blah blah blah. And now here we are with Animal Kingdom, but
that's different.
Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
They had dipped their foot into this like mechanical show, mechanical character thing in the past, but on the Jungle Cruise and on the Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, those were more just like two-stage motion characters where like
it'd lift a head or something.
Yeah, it'd lift a head, it'd turn, it'd open a mouth, it would look. Yeah. Things like that. No, it was very simple. Kind of think of it as like that was like the GIF version, and the Tiki Room is like the .mov version, like the actual like cartoon version, in updated terms. Walt had this drive to make 3D characters, basically bring cartoons into three-dimensional space and make them real. The way the story goes of how this kind of came about with the birds is Walt had picked up a bird from most places say New Orleans, but other places say Paris. I'm not sure where. Maybe he bought two birds. I don't know. But
the D23 says New Orleans.
Yeah.
But then other things we saw said Paris, which I liked that idea because I thought, well, maybe they just had different technologies that they were utilizing over there. But maybe it was New Orleans, but it's from Paris. Like he got it at like a antique or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't get that figured out. Yeah, to the exact detail.
Yeah.
But regardless, he bought a bird. He bought a small mechanical bird
for Lillian
and for his wife, and he was really intrigued with like how it moved. Like it seemed really advanced, and it would like move its head and look up and down and chirp, and then it would stop and then would start again. So he was like, this is really advanced. Like we could do something like this, make it better. So the way the story goes is he gave the bird to Walthall Rogers, and he was joined with Roger Brogy and Bob Gurr, and Walt was like, here, take this, figure out how it works, and make it better.
Rip apart this thing I got my wife. No.
Yeah, he's like, I have this idea.
Yeah.
I want these mechanical birds. Figure out how this thing works and make it work for this show, which the show had not been developed yet. So it was a real like loosey-goosey kind of idea, like, oh, just make this a thing that does a thing. And they said, yeah, sure, of course, as people usually do.
Yeah, that's what you say to Walt. Yeah.
So, and then this is how they came up with audio animatronics. Like this is like the birthplace of it.
Say that again for people in the back. This is audio animatronics, which again, like I don't think that people think about that when they go on these rides and go to all these different amusement parks all over the world. Disney did that. Walt did that. And this is where it started. So that's really huge. Yeah.
So this is the very beginning. This is the first time they ever came up with this technology, this idea.
Yeah.
So the way audio animatronics work is they use pre-recorded movements and sound to create the illusion of a moving living figure, which sounds simple. It is not. And this is the way it worked back then, is tones were recorded onto the tape that also had the voice recording, and those tones would vibrate. It would send a signal to this metal reed that was in the circuit, and it would vibrate it and close the circuit. So when that circuit is closed, it triggers this relay that sends electricity up to this pneumatic valve or some sort of motor or something that would then move that part.
It's incredible.
So as the tape is playing, it's triggering all of these different motions to happen, and that's why it moves all together, and it looks like it's one moving thing. So if one part stops, if the tape stops at all, the whole thing stops. So it's not like the bird would stop and then the tape would keep playing and keep talking.
Yeah.
So the illusion is never broken, and it's as smooth as possible because one thing is triggering the other. So that's how those are worked originally. I'm sure it's way more complicated now. And
yeah, if you think of how this is how it started, these simple birds, and then you look at something like Pandora, and I mean, those are unbelievable.
Or Hondo at the Smuggler's Run, that thing is insane. And so I'm sure the technology is totally different now, but this was back in the day when they first invented it, and it is what I am able to understand. So, and I was not going to dive into current research.
Just wait, wait until we do one of those things, then we'll be really.
No, I was not going to start on that. So they have this incredible new technology. They figured it out. Now they just need something to cram it into. So Mark Davis, who you may remember from our Pirates of the Caribbean episode, he drew up a lot of ideas for the bird characters, and this was his first Imagineering job. So he did not have he was not an Imagineer. Well, in the sense of like working on rides and whatnot.
And we love Imagineers. We have a shirt for Imagineers. Imagineers are our spirit animals. And we also do have a shirt for, neither of us are wearing it. I am wearing one of our shirts. Oh, and scoot over, give me some sugar. Which we have in 2 colors. I love this shirt. But we do have a Tiki Room shirt. So, Small World Shirts Co. Check it out. It'll be linked. Yeah.
So Mark drew up a bunch of ideas for the bird characters and what he thought they would look like. Blaine Gibson, he was tasked with designing the main birds for the show, who are Jose, Michael, Pierre, and Fritz. So he came up with those designs for those 4 main birds. And originally they were designing the birds like more like cartoonish, like more like stylized kind of like ideas of birds. And I think this was just to like kind of add
whimsy or
to add more like emotion and character to them. But Walt saw it and he's like, no, I want regular birds. No,
realistic birds.
Realistic birds. Maybe add a little bit maybe add some more features to like the cheeks just to give it more emotion, as much as you can, but as real as possible.
Yeah. Well, that's something that happened like even with the new Lion King is that people are talking about how, and I know it's not live action CGI, but people are talking about how they don't see the emotion as much as the animated classic because obviously a lion that looks like a real lion is not going to have the same emotion in the eyes as, a CGI or live action lion.
Yeah. So you're dealing with like the nature of the thing that exists in reality. So, but so that's what they moved forward with. They went with realistic looking birds, and that's how the designs went from then on out. Imagineer Harriet Burns, who we also mentioned in our Pirates of the Caribbean episode.
Yes, and I love. Here I am here for these women. This is before feminism and girl power was such a thing. But Harriet Burns, she knew what she was doing. So
she used real feathers for the birds, and that was a big deal because they wanted them to look as real as possible. So they said, okay, well, let's use real feathers. So the only parts of the birds that aren't real feathers are their chests. And this is because Walt wanted the birds to have a breathing action.
So their chest would go in and out.
He wanted to like rise and fall. So it looked like they were breathing as they were talking. So they were like, okay, well, he mentioned this, and they're like, this is not going to be easy. We got to figure this out. So while working with this, they built the actual models, and then they ran into a problem.
Yes, and the problem was that they realized that the plan she had wasn't going to work for the rising and falling of the chest. The plan she had for the feathers was not going to work. So she had to come up with an alternative. And I thought this was so cute that she did lots and lots of trial and error. And then she saw a blue cardigan, which Stefan noticed. I didn't even notice this, but a blue cardigan that Walt was wearing, which is in a lot of videos and pictures of Walt, so you can actually see it was one of his favorite cardigans. She realized that it laid perfectly when he wore it and that you could see the rising and falling of his chest. So she told him that it says, she noticed that it moved with fabric and stretched, and so it went back to its original shape. And so then she borrowed that and used that as her idea for the birds. And that was, we're pretty sure, cashmere, which, I mean, Walt had good taste. Cashmere, quality fabric. It's going to move. It's not going to lose its shape. And
Yeah, I don't know a lot about fabric, but I heard like brushed wool, and then someone else said cashmere, so I don't know if it's cashmere brushed wool. I have no idea. But it was something along those lines. And so that's what they got to dress all of the chests of all the birds so that it would work that way. And that's what it still is today.
so they're in cashmere.
Hmm.
Birds in cashmere.
So those are the birds. As far as like making the building itself, pretty simple. It's one room. It's where the whole attraction takes place, and then there's a basement, which is where all the computers and things are stored. So nothing complicated about that. They know how to build buildings, so they had the basic plan. Like I said, the basement housed the original computer system. At the time, the computers each one was the size of like a refrigerator, like a very large refrigerator.
Yeah, huge.
Very large. I'm sure now they're like the size of an iPhone, probably.
Yeah.
Very small, a deck of cards maybe, but at the time, very big. And required a lot of cooling because those computers produced a lot of heat. So they would basically like overload and break if they were not cooled off. This is why the Enchanted Tiki Room was the first attraction at Disney World or Disneyland to have air conditioning. And I don't know how many others have air conditioning, but this one was the first because
and a great
they
place
had
to go cool down. And people still like to go to these attractions to cool down in the heat.
Yeah, exactly. So they had to have air pumping through there, the basement especially to keep the computers cool, but also up in the main room to keep all the mechanical pieces, cooled off and to just help cool the basement. So it was an added bonus for guests visiting the attraction. Outside, there are like in the queue area,
Yeah.
I guess which we would call it. It's kind of all an open area, but in the queue area where people wait to go see the attraction, there are audio animatronic Polynesian gods to keep guests like entertained in that area. They were all based on actual mythological figures, so actual like Polynesian gods. And they were designed by Colin Campbell, but they were sculpted by Raleigh Crump. And Raleigh Crump at the time, he was an animator and an Imagineer, obviously. Fun fact, he also designed the guitar string packaging for Ernie Ball. I don't know if it's the one that they have now, but at the time he designed some.
Which young Stefan had a few of those.
Yeah, it really kind of stands out as a really unique design. So kind of funny that he was the one responsible for that.
It's cool.
So, funny story about Raleigh. At the time, Blaine Gibson, who we mentioned earlier, and he's also the one who did all the sculpting on Pirates of the Caribbean for all the pirate figures. At this time, because this is obviously before Pirates, he was the only sculptor on staff. He was the only one doing all of it. So Raleigh brings him these designs because he did help, make the designs for the figures and everything. And he says, "Hey, we need these, sculpted, mocked up. We need these for
Here you
figures.
go do it. You're the sculptor."
And Blaine says, I've got too much to do. I'm too busy. He's like, I don't have a staff here. But the timeline that you need these, I'm not going to be able to deliver. So sorry." And Raleigh says, "Well, we need them. Like, what do you want me to do?" And Blaine says, "Well, you do it." He's like, "I'm not a sculptor. I don't know." What? No, I can't do it. I'm not a sculptor. And Blaine said, "Well, it's about time you figure it out." So he kind of like, gave Raleigh some pointers, and I'm sure showed him a lot along the way, but taught him how to sculpt and like
pre-YouTube too. Now I'm just YouTube it.
Yeah, exactly. And taught him like, okay, well, here's what you do, and this is how you make this happen. And he went to work, which is funny because this is like a trend with Imagineers at the time. Especially in these like the beginning stages of Disneyland when they're making all these like classic initial rides, these guys are just like thrown into things that they have no experience in, that they're not qualified for, that they've never done anything with, and they're like, just figure it out, like just do your best. And they do their best, and their best is amazing.
Yeah, and this is something we really want to touch on though, because and you had said this, but I think it really hit me, and I'm like, that's so true. That imagine how wonderful a place would be to work, where you would not just going in, punching the clock, or just going in and doing your, whatever your job is, but a place where you're like, yeah, okay, let's figure this out. Like, it was very, very much a place where they were all willing to get their hands dirty, try something new, figure it out.
Yeah, like I'm sure like people watching, I'm sure someone out there has had a job where you go there and you're like, hey, you want to help us out with this, and someone's like go-to response is, it's not my job, or I don't get paid for that.
Yeah.
But here's a place where they all have like especially initially, they were all animators. Like they had a very specific job, and then they are told, hey, try this brand new thing that you have no expertise in, and they just go, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure it out. Like that's gotta be an awesome place to work. With people like that around you, like just
Very high
inspiring
energy
everyone.
and inspiring, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my gush on the Disney in the was 60s. So there's also in the queue area, in addition to the Tiki Gods, which I could go on and on and on about the Tiki Gods. There's so much about each one of them.
Yeah.
They basically worked off of two books. One book was the actual history of these Polynesian gods, where they got like the background. Because when you walk up to them, one starts talking and it tells like, I'm so and so. This is what I do, and I'm so and so, and I do this, and it's based on the actual legend, so it is accurate. And then the art style itself is based a little bit on like what the conceptualization the conceptualization of it was from that book, and then with added features from the other book. The reason was that like some of them were kind of scary looking, or they thought they were kind of scary looking, so they wanted to like kind of dial it back. So they did a lot of research on what things like really looked like and what the style was, and got to a point where they're like, okay, this is appealing to a large audience, and it still is, within the realm of realism. So I forget.
Tiki culture itself, anyway, was very American. I mean, it was like,
It was all stylized, and like the things were appropriated and taken and redesigned. So it was not the original thing, but it was sort of close. I forget how many gods there are there. Are there 7? I can't remember, but there's enough to keep you entertained anyway while you're waiting on the
while
outside.
you're waiting, not even the show itself.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Oh, we should talk about. There's a screen at the rear of the roof.
Oh yeah. There is a at the rear of the roof. There's the Dole snack bar area. There is a screen. It plays a brief documentary of the history of the pineapple, which I didn't know there was a history to the pineapple.
But obviously, I mean, Dole and Dole brand and Dole Whip, of course, but Dole brand pineapple is very popular amongst all Disney enthusiasts. The Dole Whip float, etc., etc. All the special ones they've had.
And that was after they became, I think it was after they became the sponsors of, which is something we should probably touch on, is that initially when they were creating this thing, there wasn't like a lot of the rides initially had like a sponsor or like a corporate sponsor of some sort that funded it. Walt Disney funded this all on his own. So
his own money, like he was investing into
he
this.
He was pumping his money into it, which you can tell. There's a Wonderful World of Disney video where he's like talking about it. It's like I think it's a pretty famous clip where he's talking to like a toucan and he's explaining audio animatronics, and the bird's like, audio animatronics, bird.
Yeah.
And Walt's talking to the bird, and there's a moment where he almost sort of like cracks a little bit, and he's like, yeah, you better work. I don't know exactly what he says, but he's like, yeah, dude. He says something like, "Oh yeah, puff your chest up, look proud. You better be worth it. You cost a lot of money," which it was. I'm pretty sure, like just off the cuff, like you cost a lot of money. You better be worth it.
Yeah, which he was. They were.
So it was like a moment of him having an actual dialogue with this animatronic, where he's like, "Please, please work and be something people like." Because I can't imagine the amount of money that was dumped into this. I didn't get actual figures. I saw some estimates, but like they were so like wildly different. I didn't want to like mention any specific numbers because I have no idea what they actually are. But it had to have been a ton of money. So
absolutely.
And that actually is why it was called Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, is because Walt Disney was the one who paid for it. It wasn't like, oh, what are the names? Like It's a Small World and the People Mover and all that. They all had corporate sponsors, so it was like GE and I can't remember off the top of my head now, but they all had so and so presents.
Mm-hmm.
But Walt paid for this, so it's Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. Another story about the name is that it was originally going to be just the Tiki Room, but there was already a bar named the Tiki Room in California somewhere. So
Yep, couldn't be.
they didn't want to get people confused or like mix things up. So that was just another reason for it to be Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. So enough about the name. We would be remiss if we'd not mentioned the Barker bird, who is Juan, cousin of Jose. Jose, who is the main bird, the Hispanic master of ceremonies bird in the show. So when the attraction first opened, the idea was that in order to draw a crowd, because even though they had done a ton of advertising, they had really like pushed it out there, like, okay, here's what this is, here's what we're bringing to the table, come see it. People still didn't really know what it was, and I mean, it makes sense because at the time there wasn't a whole lot of TV and a whole lot of people, ways to get things out to people. And, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't Facebook, there wasn't all the stuff that we now use to spread the word. It was just TV and I guess newspapers. Maybe there were some other like ancillary things to like get the word out, but there wasn't a lot. So they wanted a way to get the word out to people who were there at the park at the time. So that's how they came up with this idea of a Barker bird, which was a way to draw people in and show them what was inside the attraction, what the show actually was. So if you watch videos, you can watch videos of this thing talking for like hours. It's super annoying and the way he talks. But he basically like gives you a rundown of the show. He says,
Sorry,
like,
guys, I made it.
he says
Coughing, not getting sick, just
the flowers
so
and birdies sing and all this stuff sings. Come inside. This happens. That happens. And having that bird outside talking was a way to show people like, oh, what is that thing? That's a talking bird. We should go inside and see the other talking birds. So it was like a preview, basically. The way the legend goes is that he was too good at his job. And he would draw a huge crowd. It would clog up the whole area. And it was just a big problem because there were just too many people there. So they had to retire him. So
yeah.
he really
was
only
a big deal
lasted.
to see at the time because this was new technology.
And he really only lasted like a year or two, I think maybe like a year and a half. So he wasn't there that long. So that might be true that like there were a lot of people like there clogging the area up, but the reality is that he was probably just a pain to maintenance. And when you really start looking at the many different Barker birds that they had, there were different. I mean, because they would switch the actual birds out, so there are different models. They different colored feathers, different costumes. Just they kept switching it out and maintaining and updating because it's not like this thing came inside at night or like it was covered like it is at Disney World. It was out exposed to the elements, the sun, wind, rain, everything. So it was always getting beaten and torn apart. And once people kind of had the idea of what the Tiki Room was, I think they were like, okay, let's just retire this Barker bird.
Right.
It'll just save us a ton of hassle and money and time. So that's probably the real reason why they got rid of him. But the story that you'll hear is that it's just he was too good at his job. Which, yeah, sure. If you watch the video as many times as I did, it gets, oh boy, it gets repetitive and old real fast. So moving on to the music and voices for the show.
Yeah.
The original idea for the four main birds being of different nationalities, that was Walt's idea. And the way...
Oh boy.
Oh, another coughing fit. So the way this came about is they were just having like a quick like concept session. They were talking about like, okay, what can the song be? What's this whole thing going to be? Because they had sort of an idea of what it was going to be, like tiki's talking and birds and flowers and things. And they were like, okay, well, what is the concept what's the story here? So they're trying to figure it out, and then someone says, okay, well, we should have someone narrating, so we should have like a parrot, like a parrot should be talking because that makes sense because parrots talk. And then Walt jumps in and says like, yes, and not just one parrot, four parrots, and we'll have a Spanish parrot and a French parrot and an Irish parrot, and everyone's just like, yes, yes, of course, Walt, yes, perfect. Which is a level of influence that I dream of having over people someday, where I can just say something just off the top of my head, and everyone just agrees and they go with it, and I just can just nod and say yes, of course. So that was Walt's idea. No real reason for it, just said it, and everyone just went with it. So that's how we have that now. The four main birds, they're voiced by Wally Bogue, who you may know from Wally's Golden Horseshoe Review. He does Jose. And Fulton Burley does Michael, the Irish bird, and he was the co-star in Wally's Golden Horseshoe Review. Ernie Newton does Pierre, and he was the singing knight in the Haunted Mansion. Now, all these guys did a lot of other voice work, but these are just like some like main things that you may know them from. Thurl Ravenscroft, he did Fritz, and he was Uncle Theodore, the lead singing bust in the Haunted Mansion. So two of these guys we're definitely going to talk about later on. Maybe the other two if we do Wally's Golden Horseshoe Review later on. But those are the main voice actors. A man named Bill Lee, he actually did a lot of the singing for the birds. So when they switched to like singing mode, it wasn't these four guys singing.
I'm going to make it.
Okay.
I have a candy in my mouth, so.
Are you going to survive?
Live video, people. Mm-hmm.
Drink break.
Yeah. I blame you since you were sick last week.
Yes.
That was pretty bad though, but I should have had it's my bad because I should have known. I know enough about video. So do you. I should have had a candy or a lozenge. Apologies.
We're all good now. So when the actual singing came about though, these guys weren't singing. So Bill Lee did a lot of the singing, and especially like the Bing Crosby impersonation, like when they dip into that, he does that part specifically. There are a lot of people credited with voicing the background birds. Perv Poland, Clarence Nash, Maurice Marcelino, Marion Darlington.
Yeah, you can dig down really deep into some of these things, and it is pretty interesting to see all the names. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a ton of people. I'm saving one of them for the very end because it's hilarious.
It is.
But, yeah, a ton of people did all of like the background voices. So for the songs, the Tiki 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 Room, there's only 3 tikis in there, but
it's more fun to say Tiki 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 Tiki.
That was written
by the Sherman Brothers, who are also supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Should not be trying to sing right now, but that's them, and so very, very, and tons.
Among like every other memorable Disney song that you remember, and they as they recall, the reason Walt brought them in is they had done a like Polynesian-y, like islandy song for something like very recently before that, and that's why they think like, okay, well, Walt had that in his mind. He's like, oh, they'd be perfect for this, so he brought them in to like come up with this. But they came up with the one song. Robert Hargreaves, Stanley J. Demerol, and Tolkert Evans, they composed "Let's All Sing Like the Birdies Sing," so they put that together.
And if you haven't been on or been to the attraction, I might need to steal your water. But if you haven't been to the attraction, it is definitely worth pulling up the videos on it. It's really fun to watch. It really is. And then you'll totally understand what we're talking about. So if you don't know what we're talking about and you want to know, it's definitely worth your 20 minutes to watch.
Oh yeah. Watch the sit through of the whole thing because it is very interesting, especially now. George Bruns, he came up with the majority of the music used in the show itself. So like I don't remember the names of the actual songs, but like the main themes and kind of like some of the interludes and stuff like that. He really composed the general like feel and theme of the whole thing. But everyone involved will say like that the music was a group effort. Like there's no one person. I mean, the Sherman Brothers did the one song. I know that I've seen interviews where they say like, yeah, we did one song. Like, that was it. But it was a group effort to really bring the entire thing together. But George Bruns is credited with doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that. And I just thought it was funny that they use hi ho at the end to urge people to get
As
out
in,
there.
get out.
Yeah. Which is just a funny way to get people to exit the whole attraction.
Well, and it has that kind of, like, I think about when you think of the 50s diner at Walt Disney World, how that, like, they're rude and kind of like giving you a hard time, but in a fun natured way. This is like that, but they're serious. They're like, yeah, haha, it's funny and cute, but we mean it. You need to get out so the next people can come in.
Yeah, get out of here. We got to reset this and get more people in here. Come on, we got to move numbers, people. Come on.
Exactly.
That's really the ride, not the ride, but the attraction itself. Not a lot of drama in terms of like putting the whole thing together. Like I said, it was like they had one goal, and then there was just people coming at it from every direction, trying to get this thing made and figured out. And in the end, it just kind of came. It was an amalgamation of all this effort, and then they ended up with this amazing new thing. And it's hard to picture today. I mean, really, almost impossible, really, to picture like the moment of like awe and wonder of seeing these things for the first time. Like this is stuff we grew up with. Like we grew up with things that were light years ahead of it, and today have things that are light years ahead of that.
Right. Well, there's one video, and I can't remember now who it is who's speaking, but it's super cute because he talks about how his grandparents came to visit him and his parents, who lived in California, so like near Anaheim. And she was from, I think it was Iowa, but she was from a small town. And this was, of course, she was an older woman at the time, and how she just had her hands by her face and she's clapping and singing along and excited. And he said that to this day, he still thinks that she thought that they were real birds, but she's just like, I mean, it was like amazing. It was the most amazing thing she had ever seen in her life. So you have to really think about how impactful that would be. Like if you hadn't, like to us, the things that we see, I mean, we can see things on our phone, see things constantly new stuff, always happening. We're just used to it. But to them, at the time, that was a big deal.
Yeah, no one had ever seen anything like this before. Like this was a revolution in terms of like entertainment. And I mean, and just think of like the culture at the time. Like there was like 3 TV channels maybe, and entertainment was definitely not at a premium. People had to really seek it out to find stuff like this. So when you see something like this, it would just blow your mind, and it would just be the most amazing thing you ever saw, which I think is a testament to why it still exists today.
Yeah.
There's today, it's nothing super special, but it holds a special place in people's hearts because at the time it was just so amazing.
Yeah, and I think that the following that it has kept going, and people love it. I mean, people eat up all the merch for it. People hopefully will be interested in this, and I mean, we were, and we certainly aren't like the generational target, for when it first came out. We weren't alive.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the ride itself, or the attraction itself anyway, the original attraction.
Yeah.
It does have 2 different versions in 2 different locations. The first one in Walt Disney World. It was originally an identical copy. It opened with Disney World in 1971.
With a different name, though.
Yes, it was called Tropical Serenade. And I think this was because they wanted the original to be Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. They wanted it to be Walt Disney's. This is the only one because he originally sponsored it, and I don't think we mentioned before, but it did go through a few sponsors after Walt. So like it did have other corporate sponsors like United Air and Dole, and I think there was another one in there, maybe not. But regardless, they set up this new one, and even though it was the same show, it had a different name. In 1998, it was renamed, and this is the Walt Disney World one, it was renamed the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management, and it featured Iago and Zazu. So it had 2 animatronic...
2 of my favorite birds.
Iago and Zazu's in there. The show was like obviously updated to include them, and it was a little different.
A little more fun, too, for people who didn't understand. Like, they were like, why would I care about the Enchanted Tiki Room? Kind of updated
especially the Disney World one, because it didn't have the history of being like the first place. So I'm sure they were trying to draw people to it, being like, hey, look, characters
kids can see,
Then in 2011, January of 2011, there was a fire, and the Iago animatronic was badly damaged. So they had to shut the ride down, or the attraction down. I keep saying ride. They had to shut the attraction down
every week,
and do some maintenance on it. It reopened in August of 2011 as Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, and it featured a slightly edited version of the original Disneyland show. I don't know what was edited about it because I didn't see any sort of comparison videos or anything
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
different than because for the rides we can watch ride through videos and you can see side by side, so it's really easy when we're trying to kind of do our research. So this was different than that.
Yeah, and I found some of like the Iago Zazu one, and then I couldn't tell if I was watching one of the 2000 the post 2011 version or if it was pre 98.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't tell. So I don't know what's new about it, but it is slightly different. The other version is in Tokyo Disneyland. This originally opened as, again, a carbon copy of the original show. So they opened it up and it was supposed to be the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
In 1990, when did Tokyo Disneyland open? That was 80s? 82? 81?
Trying to think, because I know Paris was. That sounds right. I feel like they had definitely celebrated 30 years, but it might be like 35. If you know, comment or we will update in the description box. Always check the description box. We put all the good stuff there.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was the 80s though. But it was supposed to be a carbon copy of the original show, which it was. Which was easy. It's easy to do with this because everything's programmed. So you just build the same exact birds, you build the same exact theater, you put the same exact computers and reels and everything on, and then it's all the same thing. That's my quick
Step in
version.
the.
They did update it in 1999. It reopened as the Enchanted Tiki Room, now playing Get the Fever. And it was supposed to be more like a Las Vegas style nightclub show, which
Very interesting.
sounds blasphemous to me. I don't know why you would do that. They were trying to draw more people to it though. Like
Yeah.
they had a decline in sales and people like visiting it, and they want to get more people into it, so they did this. Obviously, did not last that long. Well, let's
Because
say not
then,
that
yeah,
long, but
in
nearly a decade.
2008, it was rethemed again. The Enchanted Tiki Room, Stitch. Hey,
Oh yeah,
I didn't even. Usually I do plan this, but I did not today.
Stitch presents Aloha I Komo Mai.
Yes.
And it has like they do Hawaiian roller coaster ride and other songs from the movie.
I love. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
which
love
this one
all
sounds super fun.
Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, because we love that movie. And
All of them. I mean,
I
especially Lilo and Stitch.
yeah.
But I love anything with Stitch.
And this also just seems like a no-brainer. Like that because
Hawaii.
Lilo and Stitch came out like what 99, didn't it? Like super long time ago.
Oh yeah, the first huh?
So like that just seems like a no-brainer that they would just update it with that. I would have no problem if they did it with the Walt Disney World one either, because like that is like some of my favorite songs.
Yeah, they
and-
could. I don't think that they could do it in Disneyland because people are very protective of that. But
Yeah,
they could do it
yeah,
at Disney World.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Update that one, and that's well, Disney World is where we go, so I would see it there. But then that is as far as the other attractions, that's kind of where they are today. And both of them still exist too, so it's not like they open and close, so they're still there. Now, as far as the original place, the Disneyland version, with updates and refurbishments, unlike some of the attractions we've talked about in the past, the Tiki Room Disneyland version has remained basically the same. They haven't added anything new. I mean, it's not like Pirates where there's a bunch of controversial stuff and they're like, we gotta update this.
Yeah.
They just it was the same thing. Now it did undergo a lack of care for quite a long time. Attendance was down. I saw an interview with a cast member who used to work the Tiki Room, and he said there were a lot of times where it was just completely empty, and we would still have to play the show.
And now it's had a surge with like this cult following, but not then. It kind of had that lull.
Yeah, so this is like late 90s, early 2000s. There was just people not showing up, but you still had to play the show. So he talked about how he would play the show and then just like walk around and look at everything. And then there was a button where like you could mute everything. So he would mute it and then like watch everything just kind of move and come down because there's no one there. So he's like, why not? Which sounds super interesting. Like, what a cool thing to be able to do. After it kind of people were really into it, and we mentioned this in our Little Mermaid episode.
Episode 2.
Yep.
Linked.
That
Description box.
the mid to late '90s, there was this focus on merchandising and not
Yes, the
so
management
much.
at Disneyland.
Yes, they were not so concerned with attractions as they were with selling merchandise, and things started.
Getting you to buy stuff.
Yes, and there was a big complaint at the time that rides were beginning to suffer and they were starting to look like garbage and they really need to be maintained and like this is not the quality that we come to expect of Disneyland. So in 2004, the Tiki Room did undergo a extensive refurbishment. They shut it down and they basically redid the entire thing. All of the birds came down, all the flowers, everything. They refeathered, they reflowered, they painted, they
Recashmered.
yeah, they redid everything to make it look as like fresh and like nice as the original. And it wasn't just like the external parts either. They redid all of the mechanical parts inside. They updated everything. So because one of the main complaints was that the parts were starting to sound really like noisy and loud.
Yeah.
Like you'd hear like gears like.
Well, think of how long it had been open at this point. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
only natural. That's going to
Yeah,
happen.
just standard maintenance done, no updates or anything. So they redid all the parts inside and made everything like really like move smoothly and quietly. Everything got a refurb. Let's see if I'm missing anything here because I think as far as
Yeah. Well, and then in 2005, they discovered this is pretty cool, the original studio tapes for the audio. So they were able to restore those, which is a huge deal. I mean, because imagine, again, when this ride opened and then they had not been able to, I mean, that's the technology change in that amount of time is crazy. So they were able to add brand new speakers to give the show a more pristine clarity like it had never had before. And it's funny because 2005, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that long ago, but it was about 15 years ago. I mean, it was quite a while ago. That was my high school graduation year, but pretty awesome that there was somebody who was like, oh, hey, look what I found when they were combing through.
yeah, and I can't say for sure if the speaker like I'm sure like a speaker had blown I mean you're talking 50 years so or 40 years. Like I'm sure a speaker had blown, so they replaced it in that sense. But I don't think they actually replaced any of the audio pieces until that time. So it wasn't until the mid early 2000s that they actually got an update with speaker and audio equipment, which is crazy. But so essentially after that everything was updated. Everything was brand new. It was like a brand new attraction. It was the same but new. Everything sounded better, looked better. And it's I mean, had a big resurgence since then. I mean, people are super into going to the Tiki Room.
Oh yeah, it's very popular. Oh, we are okay. I'm gonna hop over. If you are live, I'm gonna hop over to our live comments. If you're watching the replay, that's what I'm doing. And Caleb says, "Hi, Caleb. Thanks for joining us. Have you been to the Enchanted Tiki Room?"
We have not.
No, we have not. We do this show though every week, so come join us. We're wrapping up tonight, but
So that's the ride as it is today. It had its 50th anniversary in 2013. It hasn't really had any updates since then, but it's still it's like a cult classic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people are all about it. So now we're getting into the fun fact lightning round. Fun fact lightning.
we need to get I need to get like a little burp sound
A little
effects.
button.
Yeah. All of a sudden, Leah has like the triangle.
We'll get
a xylophone. Who's like, oh.
or I'll get like one of those a piece of tin.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Bringing effects next time.
I'm gonna let you do the first one.
Okay. First one isn't on here actually. When the
okay.
Tiki Room first opened,
Going off script here.
it did cost. Oh no, I should have written it down. 25 cents, I think, or 50 cents. I can't remember. I think it was 25 cents. But you had to buy a ticket because it was.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't included in
Yeah.
the ticket price to the entry to the park because it was not sponsored by anything. Walt put all his
Except
own
for
money
Walt.
into
Yeah.
it. So you had to buy a ticket to get into it, which at first was like, whoa, 25 cents or 50, depending on which is right. Which it just seems crazy now. But yeah, you had to buy a ticket initially, which blew people's minds. Eventually you didn't have to do that, but they did exist. Okay, so this is my favorite fact, I think. So as far as the people doing the bird voices, like all the warbling and the singing and whatnot, there was a man who and I'm pretty sure this was a nickname, but it's the best nickname I've ever heard.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
why I'm letting you do this one.
Dr. Horatio Q Birdbath. And he's a famous bird song caller.
Bird bath.
He did a lot of the or many of the like whistles and warblings included in the original soundtrack, and that's just the best name ever.
And the first fact that I thought was cool is the original concept art showed the idea of a birthday bird. So, when you go to a restaurant and it's your birthday and they bring you
Yeah, this was at like the original restaurant concept.
Yes. It's your birthday and they all do the clapping and they bring you a brownie or, whatever it is. So it would have been carted out to you and it would have sang happy birthday and delivered a birthday cake, which I think would be great. I think that'd be awesome. Some people hate that. I'm all about it. I'm like, bring me the brownie, sing to me.
Yeah, when you see drawings of this thing, it was like a big cart, and like the cart is what housed all the animatronic parts and everything.
Yeah.
And then you have your cart, and then you have your bird that sits on top, and then there's like a cake or whatever here, and then push out, and the bird would sing to you and talk and everything, which would have just been super cool to have like come out.
It would have been my birthday every day.
Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna skip to the bottom one here.
Okay.
Now, I added this because I don't want people to think that we didn't do our research. But I found a few places. It seems to originate from this one D23 article where they mentioned this, but then I see it like propagated through like all these other like videos and articles that I saw after the fact. But at one point, Walt had imagined a Chinese restaurant to go somewhere in the park. And this was before he conceived of the Tiki Room. Now, I don't think the two are connected. I think it's just that he thought, oh, hey, it would be cool to have a Chinese restaurant. And then what ended up happening, I'll just tell the story, is he had this grand idea of it also being kind of like a dinner and a show where you'd walk in and there'd be like this Confucius looking type character and you could ask him questions and it would be animatronic. You could ask him questions and he would like give you like wisdom, words of wisdom. And then like the show would have like a fire breathing dragon and all this other advanced stuff. And Imagineers looked at it and they were like, yeah, well, we can't do this. Like this just isn't, we can't pull this off. So he's like, all right. So they got rid of that idea. And then later on came up with the Tiki Room idea. What I've found is that people seem to connect the two like, oh, before the Tiki Room it was supposed to be a Chinese restaurant.
Right.
I don't think that's the case. I think that this Chinese restaurant was an idea.
Yeah.
That existed before the Tiki Room idea, and then they said no, and he said, oh, okay, and then later on came with the Tiki Room.
Yeah.
I don't think they're connected in any way.
Yeah, it's another, and if you have ideas or you know anything about it, let us know. We'd definitely be interested, but it's one of those things where there's not really any steadfast, yes, this is the answer.
Yeah, so, and like I said, I found it in that one D23 article, and then other people repeated it afterwards, so I don't think that's what it was. I think it was one idea, another idea, and then that's it. So anyway, that's just that portion of it.
Yeah. And do you want to do?
Well, one more fun fact.
One more, yeah.
The original exit for the Disneyland version was supposed to go through the Tahitian Terrace. So the way it would work is you would finish the show and you would exit through past the Tahitian Terrace so that you could kind of see it and be like, oh,
when they have you exit through a gift shop.
Yeah. It was supposed to be closed at the time so you could see it and be like, oh, well, look at that. We could have dinner there and we could see a show. That's a good idea. When they ended up getting rid of like the restaurant idea and kind of changed everything, they changed the main exit to what was supposed to be the alternate exit that you would use when the Tahitian Terrace was open, and that ended up being the main and only exit. Another funny thing about that, the reason that the Tiki Room has bathrooms is the only attraction to have bathrooms on the outside is because it was supposed to be a restaurant.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
So there's a lot of weird like leftovers from that time, and it also shows like again like how it all was coming together like randomly from all these different areas all at the same time. Like they'd already begun work on all of this stuff, and then like, no, do this.
That string on the bulletin
board. Add
this,
do that, do this, and that's how that all kind of came about.
Yeah. So we want to thank The Live Place and Dean from The Live Place for hosting our stream. And theliveplace.com. It will be linked in the description box. Definitely check it out. There is tons of family-friendly and Disney-related streamers on there. Some really, really fun people. So definitely check that out. And we want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to us to have you here. If you're watching the replay, please comment or respond. Share this video if you like it. And I want to thank you for dealing with me. I was not a very good, I broke a broadcaster rule, and I thought water would be fine, even though I had that itch in my throat, but I will have lozenges if that happens again. I really apologize. That was not very professional. It was very real. It was not very professional to hop off a couple of times, but didn't want to be coughing in front of you guys.
If there's a ride or an attraction that you want to see us cover in the future, be sure to reach out to us on Instagram. That's the best way to get a hold of us.
I am LeahTackles on Instagram.
And I am at Small World Shirts Co.
And they will both be linked in the description box. So it's easy for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope you have a magical day.
We'll see you real soon.
Bye.
Bye, guys.